Coming up on this week's edition of Sunday Nation, our continued examination of Women's History Month. We're going to look at federal judge Victoria Roberts. She was the focus of my Thursday column in the Detroit News. She and I will sit down for a special conversation March 28th at the Curtis L. Ivory downtown campus of Wayne County Community College District. And of course, we are also looking at Mayor Karen Bass becoming the first black woman, the first woman mayor of the city of Los Angeles. But we begin with my conversation, our interview with Daniel J. Loepp, the president and CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Michigan's largest insurer is here to talk to us on the issue of corporate social responsibility and what it means in this era. It's all coming up on this week's edition of Sunday Nation. Welcome back to Sunday Nation. In the age of the revitalization of the city, the comeback city, what role can corporate leaders play here in the city of Detroit? Dan Loepp is the longtime president and CEO of the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, which is the largest insurer here in the state of Michigan. Several years ago, decided to move its headquarters to Detroit. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Bankole. It's always a pleasure. It's good to see you again.
Likewise. I want to begin with the role of business. Over the years, it has kind of evolved, and you know, there are those who argue, well, say, well, you know, business's role is not to get involved, just make the profit and get Wall Street and NASDAQ to ring the bell, right. Make your investors and directors happy.
Yeah, you know, I take a generally totally different view of that.
Yeah.
First of all, we're not a stock company. We're a nonprofit mutual.
Right.
And so the lust for profit is not quite. I mean, you know, you can't have a mission without a margin.
Right.
But we don't answer to stockholders.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's allowed us to be much more strategic
mm-hmm.
and look at things in year tranches as
mm-hmm.
opposed to every quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, you know, I understand that my colleagues that are in stock companies, they got things they manage differently, we manage differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I think most of the leaders that I deal with in the various groups that are involved mm-hmm. believe that we have an obligation to the city, to the state, to the region, mm-hmm. To our employees and to mm-hmm. the citizens mm-hmm. to make a difference. Mm-hmm. For me to sit on the sidelines and not worry about stuff, mm-hmm. You know, I just can't do that. Mm-hmm. And I think you talked about us moving all of our employees to downtown Detroit. The other thing we did too, at the same time, or you know, within the right. same year, 18 months, is we developed the Lansing Board of Water and Light building, which was empty for 30 years. We put the accident fund, which we own, and Blue Cross in this building, and it's right on the riverfront, and it has fundamentally changed the sort of the landscape of Lansing. And you know, Lansing's not nearly as big as Detroit, mm-hmm. but we've got 1,000 employees in there. Mm-hmm. And it's really made a difference. We also did it in Grand Rapids, where we moved from the suburbs into the city and redeveloped a building. And we've got almost 600 employees in Grand Rapids. I have you know, I was born and raised in the city. I grew up on the east side of Kelly and Whittier. And so I have you know, my feeling for the city runs, you know, I'm well into my 60s now, and right. and mm-hmm. the reemergence of Detroit, mm-hmm. to me is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And you know, when we did move everybody down here, it's kind of interesting that at the same time, within 2 weeks of each other, that's when Quicken came down, Rocket Mortgage now, but came down from the suburbs. We came in, we were already headquartered in Detroit, but we moved all our suburban sales and provider units back into the city.
So Dan Gilbert followed you?
I can say I followed him. It was okay. We both, that was a huge synergy. Mm-hmm. And obviously Rocket who's a client of ours, has, you know, grown in leaps and bounds since then, since 10, 12 mm-hmm. years ago. Yeah,
so let's talk about Blue Cross, the largest insurer here in the state, and you've been at the helm as a significant business leader here. Looking at where Detroit is, there are many people who are not happy with the state of Detroit because it's one of the largest inequality cities in the country. I mean, you call it an epicenter for poverty, the rates are high and so forth. What role do you see business playing from where you sit? What is the responsibility? Because you basically said your hands are not tied, so you're not answering to Wall Street per se.
Right, we're not, and,
yeah.
I think part of tone from the top is to make a difference, to lift people both from a policy standpoint, from a program standpoint, but an opportunity standpoint too. We have, I'm proud of the fact, the amount of, in management and in executive level positions, the amount of persons of color and women that are in executive positions. That doesn't happen by happenstance. You have to view as a leader, it has to be a priority, because that whole thing gets lost unless you pay attention to it. And we've done, I think, a real good job. You can always do better, but and you know, about 70% of our employees are people of color, and the average, you know, it's a good paying job, great benefits, and it's a good quality of life. People like working at Blue Cross. And I get feedback. I'm always up and around, walking through the offices, talking to people. I think generally people really enjoy working there, and they do believe we are mission driven. Whether it's you know, the program we're in now around maternal health, to try to really cut into the disparities in maternal health. You know, when you go into underserved places, Detroit being one of them.
Right.
When you look at the statistics around the problems with pregnancies, with births, with the kids having adequate postnatal care, you know. Our job and our goal is to cut those rates in half over the next 5 years. And what you find, and I've learned this over 25 years of doing this, is that if you get good health care, meaning you have a primary care doc or you have somewhere you can go, clinic or wherever it is, and you see somebody once a year, your kids see somebody once a year, their health is better, and long term it's a big deal. And what we've done in partnering with some clinics around the national players, ChenMed being one of them, Oak Street Health, we've gone right into Detroit. We've got 6 clinics now in Detroit where both seniors and others can take advantage of it, which, you know, it's sometimes, you know, from a healthcare standpoint, there are deserts out there, and we're trying to deal with that. And those are the types of things that we need to do, we should do as a corporate citizen.
And that's where my next question is coming to, and because the maternal care that you talked about, it's it's an inequality issue.
There's no doubt.
And but the role of corporations becoming corporate citizen, it means different things to different CEOs. And there are those who will say, well, you know, there's only so much we could do. In the case of Blue Cross, when you are approached to respond to issues in the community, what is your response?
Well, I think our responsibility, because we're as big as we are, and we cover half the people in the state of Michigan. And so we have a responsibility to those people and to our employee base. And so if we can make a difference, you know, I'm always looking for a way to make a difference. For example, we've got a $5 million effort on the east side in my old neighborhood. We're rebuilding basically East Warren, where you're going to have affordable housing, opportunities for businesses to set up, really cleaning the landscape and making things better. That neighborhood's is, you know, it's come under some tough times, but we're rebuilding Baldock Park, which is a Chandler Park right near St. John Hospital. We're rebuilding that, putting in baseball fields. When I was a kid, I used to toboggan there, and it's kind of come into a little bit of disrepair. This thing's all going to get fixed up, so kids are going to be able to do what I did 55 or so years ago. I hate to admit it, but and those are the things that we can do. But, you know, opportunity around jobs, employment, and health, to me, is the most important thing we do. And to speak out. When we went through the whole George Floyd fiasco, I was very vocal. And And I learned some things because we did a lot of back and forth with our own employees. I did town halls. And, you know, I always assume that I am aware and I'm progressive and ahead of the game, which I think I am. But I shocked myself when I really got into detail talking to people and understanding much better. And I'm not a person of color, so you know, you just you can intellectualize it, but it's not
you're a powerful white male.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this though, on the question of George Floyd here, because I think when George Floyd happened, you know, there was this national clarion call here on corporations and corporate leaders, to look within themselves and also in their within their own companies. Talk about that experience for you. That you know, did you do some reflection?
Big time. It was very introspective. I thought I knew a lot of things, and I realized after you have good conversation with your employees that I didn't know nearly as much as I should have. And it's when you talk to others, for example, the whole thing about, and I've known, but the whole instance of the talk, and when you actually have a conversation with mothers and fathers about their 15-year-old boys and girls, about what all of this stuff means. You know, I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Detroit, but it wasn't, you know, that wasn't really an effective issue on me. Now, when you talk to people, it's a big deal, and we as leaders have to understand that and be vocal about that shouldn't be happening to anybody.
Let's go on a quick break. We'll be right back with Dan Loepp, the President and CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. This is Sunday Nation. Stay with us.